Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the After the Frame podcast. My name is Malik, and I am joined, as always, by.
Hi, my name is Matt.
And today we are diving into the new body horror flick together. Matt, going into this, how are you feeling going into this movie?
My feelings going in were pretty unsure. It just seemed like one of those kind of unsettling type movies. And trailer wise going in, I was kind of like, maybe I'll wait till it's on streaming or something. But then as the time, came closer, I was like, let me actually go check this out. And then we decided to do it for this week's review. So I saw it Thursday night and wow, I mean, this thing is just gnarly. It's like super gross, sticky body horror that really just had me squirming in my seat the whole time. It's not one of those horror movies where you're scared to look. It's more you kind of want to look away, but you can't. Alison Brie and Dave Franco are, they're actually a married couple, but which works well for the film. They absolutely go for it here. It's almost like a two-person version of The Substance. You're just watching them slowly fall apart in front of you, and it's really uncomfortable in the best way. The whole movie, just leans on their performances, and they both crush it. What I found to be really cool about Together is how it balanced this weird mix of tones. It's obviously super gross and hard to watch at times, but there's this dark sense of humor running through it. And there are even moments of romance, which is a weird combo when you've got all this nasty body horror happening. And underneath all of that, there's something going on that's actually really relatable. It's not just being gross for the sake of being gross. The movie uses all that sticky, claustrophobic imagery to show what it feels like being stuck in a toxic relationship. You really feel trapped right along with them. Overall, I had a great time with it. It's definitely not for everyone. If body horror isn't your thing, you'll probably hate it, but it's daring, weird, and fully committed to what it's doing. And seeing with the audience that I saw it with, it made it even better because everybody was cringing and laughing at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, the audience I saw it with, it was actually a lot more packed than I thought. I never even saw a trailer for this movie. I just constantly saw the little snippets of the advertisements on like YouTube. But the big draw for me was Alison Brie and Dave Franco because I've seen them in so many other, well, at least Dave Franco in a lot of other movies, and then I'm a big fan of Community, and Alison Brie is in that one. So I was drawn to it because of them too, and like how you said, they're a married couple in real life, and the chemistry between them in this movie was really superb in my opinion. I think that the director casting an actual couple in real life was a very good move. Yeah, like you said, this movie is not going to be for everyone. It's not your typical horror movie with a ton of jump scares. It has its moments where things like kind of pop out a little bit, but it's a little bit more of an unsettling film. So it's not going to be for everyone, but I think that so far this year, the horror movies that we've had have been really good so far with this. The Conjuring's coming out next month, and then we had Bring Her Back, which we both really liked as well. But I didn't have many thoughts going into this. I was just interested because Alison Brie and Dave Franco are known for their comedy. As you said, it balances tones in this movie. There's a good amount of comedic stuff. My theater was laughing at a few Dave Franco scenes. But yeah, it balanced everything I thought pretty well. I enjoyed this movie a lot more than I thought, and it evoked all the emotions out of me that I think the movie was trying to evoke out of the audience. You were squirming in your seat. You couldn't quite look away, even though you wanted to. No complaints on my part. The first scene opens up. It seems like somebody's lost. We have a search party looking for them in the woods. The search party has a set of dogs that go out looking in the woods. They come upon this hole, and the dogs go down there. You see there's this pool of water. The dogs, drink from it. And we come to find out that, that this is very integral to the story. After the scene, the owner of the dogs takes him back home. And later on that night, you hear the dogs like struggling in like a shed or something like that. The owner is woken up from his daughter, and he goes out into the shed and sees that the dogs are kind of beginning to morph. But what I liked about this scene is that the movie doesn't let you sit on the actual morphing of the dogs yet. It's a very quick thing, so you don't get to fully see what's going on. We meet Tim and Millie, who are played by Dave Franco and Alison Brie. They are a couple. They are not married. They're having a party, a going away party, because Millie, Alison Brie's character, has just gotten a new job as a teacher, and he is a struggling musician, they kind of say. He's dependent on her to a certain degree, obviously, because he doesn't have a job. So because she got a new job, he's kind of got to leave his life behind in this town, even though he doesn't want to. A few things we find out in this scene. We find out that Millie has this friend that's not really a big fan of Tim, kind of thinks he's a bit of a bum, and talks to Millie about it, saying she can just go to this new place and find another guy. Then we find out that Tim agrees to join this band. He gets a gig with them, and he's going to have to move with Millie a few hours away, but then have to commute back and forth when they get gigs. And then we find out things like Tim has a bit of a drinking problem and that he doesn't have a driver's license, little things like that. He has a little bit of a speech in this towards the end, just, talking to their friends. And then Millie kind of awkwardly proposes in this scene with no box. She kind of just opens up her hands, but there's no box or ring. And I was very confused. And even Dave Franco's character was confused, thought it was a joke or something, but no, she was being sincere and proposing. It was awkward, and like people didn't know how to react to it. And that's basically how that scene ends.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this was a pretty tame but still wild opening. Because, it starts with Millie, who we find just got a job as an elementary school teacher, and she's moving out to the countryside with her longtime boyfriend, Tim, who's still trying to make it as a musician. And then, yeah, right before they leave at this going away party, Millie proposes to him, and he just freezes. He doesn't say yes, he doesn't say no, he's just standing there. It was super awkward, and you can feel the tension immediately.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, it's one thing to be proposed to, but it was opening her hands with no box, like pretending she had like a ring. So I understood where his character was like, is this meant to be like a prank or a joke? Like, I'm not in on it. So he just stands there like very awkwardly, and all the friends are kind of like looking around, and it's just that awkward situation. So I was a little confused with this next scene. So the next scene is them in bed. Um, and they're talking it up. We find out that they haven't had sex in a while. They're just talking about the awkwardness of the night before. He says like, "Oh, I had too much to drink. I don't want to have sex." We can tell that this is a strain on the relationship, and she kind of rolls her eyes and says, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure." Then he's having a nightmare, and Millie's talking to him, saying, "Oh, I know you resent me." And we see Willy Wonka style that there's like a couple at the bottom of their bed combining, and the bed's shrinking in, and then this woman who has a very weird face creeps up under the blanket to scare him, and he wakes up. And why I was confused is because they were just at a party the night before. So did they move during the night? Because they said it was a few hours away, because he wakes up and they're at the new house and they're already moved in. So I didn't understand that whole transition, I guess. It was a little weird for me.
Yeah, I mean, it was an odd transition to them from the city to the country, but yeah, my take on it was just a standard, run of the mill nightmare. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The transition from which I can appreciate them not showing, hey, we're gonna take this road trip to the country, and oh, we're here, we're at the house. I wouldn't want to see that whole spiel done time and time again. But from a transition take, I can understand where you're coming from about the awkwardness and it did just feel quick. So
Yeah, a little odd. So then they're starting to, move boxes in and everything like that. Tim makes a point saying he smells something. There's like a weird smell in the house. Millie is not smelling it though. He immediately goes upstairs, grabs a stool, and he plays with this light fixture. Takes it down, and he reaches his hand in there. No gloves or anything, mind you. Just reaches in there and grabs out this family of like rats, and then Millie comes out and asks, "How did you know to look there?" And all that will be explained later. Millie is now beginning to settle in the next scene. She's in the teacher's lounge, and we get introduced to Jamie, who is a fellow teacher at the school. To me, it kind of seemed like he was flirting with her. He mentions that he is in the same neighborhood as her, and let me know if you ever want somebody to show you around the neighborhood, that type of thing. And then they go off about their business.
yeah, with his introduction, I mean, he is like the third main character in
Mhm.
sorts, but I thought they handled his introduction really well because, Alison Brie, Millie, started her new position at a school, and she didn't really know anybody. And I thought this was a good introduction to, hey, this character is going to play an important role, but he's also kind of warming up and serving as a friend and ally to Millie in her role. That's Damon Harriman. He was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I don't know if you saw that.
Never seen it. No.
Oh, you are missing out. So he played Charles Manson in that movie. Um,
I can see in this movie the
yeah,
the crossover.
he played Charles Manson in that movie. But he also played. I don't know if you ever watched the show Justified on FX a couple years ago.
Nope.
He played a character named Dewey Crow who was very kind of awkward, but also very like unsure. He was very like I don't know, man, like very like pacey. But yeah, I thought his character was, you know, a strong introduction for both his character and Millie.
Yeah, we'll see him create a little bit more tension in our main characters a little bit later. Um, but yeah, so we cut back home, and Millie wants Tim to come to bed. He's like downstairs playing with I think it was his guitar, and he's like trying to write music or practice what have you because he has a gig coming up. He says Thursday because he doesn't have a license. He needs either Millie to drive him all the way there, which obviously she has a career, she can't do that, so she agrees. I'll just drop you at the train station, and you can take it there. So yeah, she wants him to come to bed once again. She wants that intimacy, and he's like it off like another thing. I have my music I got to do, and she's once again frustrated. We see, and it just creates more of a rift. So he says, "Well, what about this hiking that you told me about? You said there's a few good trails around here. How about we go hiking tomorrow?" We cut to the hike the next day. They're walking around. They get a little lost, but Tim finds a trail that has these bells with it look like a little sun on them. And he says, "Oh no, this trail is marked, so we can go this way." And they follow that trail there, and it starts raining suddenly, and they're very confused. Obviously, they're new to this place. There's a joke where he pulls out his compass and says, "This way's north." And then Millie's like, "Okay, so what do we do with that?" And he's like, "I don't know. I thought it'd be helpful." I thought those little instances were pretty funny. They're wandering around. He falls in the hole from that first scene. He's fallen down and he's holding on. And Alison Brie goes up and is trying to pull him up, but he ends up just pulling both of them down. And I thought that was a cool analogy with how their relationship dynamic is, where we find out that Millie feels like he's kind of like a leech a little bit and is in a way dragging her down, and she constantly feels that same way. They fall down into the hole. He's immediately more concerned about his lost phone because of his music and doesn't even check on his girlfriend. They make a joke about that. They see that there's church pews kind of jammed into the wall of this cave. He has a lighter and he says, "Let's just make fire and wait out the storm and then we'll climb back up." They break a piece of the church pew and start making a fire out of that. He has a bottle of water that he gives to her that there's not much left, and then he sees the pool that the dogs drank from, and he begins to drink from there, and he says, "Oh, it's good." And then they both start drinking from it, not knowing what's going to happen. They're sitting around the fire. Tim explains this long story about how he knew to look for the rats in their home. He said that his father came home a few times and kept on telling him, "Your room smells terrible, clean it." And he kept on cleaning it, and the dad kept complaining. And then one day he came home from school, and the dad finally found that there was a rat in the light fixture, and Tim had basically just been cooking the rat every time he turned on the light. So that was creating the smell, but because it was his room, he becomes so accustomed to it, which I thought was a cool way to put it. It to me was an analogy of being in a toxic relationship for so long that you don't even notice the bad things that are going on. It takes somebody else from a third party perspective to be in there and say something isn't right. Then we find out that Tim's dad actually died, and a similar thing happened where he started to smell like the rotting corpse. He pulled up into his parents' room. The mom had just been living with the dad's corpse in the bed. He had been dead for a few days. She had just completely snapped. And we see that that's the same vision that he had in the nightmare. So we get some good backstory onto why Tim is the way he is.
That scene, and I mean, kind of clumping together a little bit. You know, I think them going on this hike and everything is just beginning to unravel. You know, it starts raining, and then they end up crashing in this random cave overnight. And then Tim, you know, drinks from this gross looking pool of water in there. Common sense says, like, why would you do that? Like, that big mistake. They're hanging out, they're talking, you know, their history, and Tim is given some backstory on his family, and you know, they're sipping on the water, and then Tim, you know, lies down, goes to bed, and then he's having another nightmare where this scene actually thought was really, really cool because he wakes up in a panic and he's looking around him and the walls are caving in but also relaxing a little bit, and we later find that it's emulating his breathing and essentially showing that he's the cave, and his actions or whatever he's doing is, we all find that it's just a fearful incited nightmare. But then yeah, he wakes up, they both wake up in the morning, and this is where some of the unsettling starts to eep in. Their legs are literally stuck together. Tim claims that it's mildew since they're in a cave and it's sticky and wet, and the molecules just stick together. So they pull themselves apart. They're totally freaked out. But then, as you said, they climb out. They decide to just shrug it off and head home. Like, if it were me, like, no thanks. I'd be moving back to the city, like right there.
Yeah, these nightmares that he's having, clearly something's going on with him. I liked, as you said, the same scene. You felt a little anxious, kind of like him with his breathing. Back home, Millie is showered now and she's asking for a massage. We start to see that the water is starting to take over him. He starts blacking out, and while he's massaging her, he basically starts hurting her, and he doesn't even know what he's doing. She says that, oh, we don't have any food in the house. I'm going to go into town. You stay here, shower, and relax. When she's gone, he turns on the shower, and we see this interesting parallel where it's almost like he's a bit of a puppet. As soon as she starts to leave, every way the car turns left and right throughout the road, he blacks out again, and he's being flung around the shower in a very cool scene that cuts back and forth between the driving and him to dictate wherever she's turning, he's turning, and it's hurting him. He starts bleeding, and then he wakes up from his trance. And because of this, he goes to the doctor immediately, and the doctor is telling him everything that happened with his mom and past trauma, and this could just be an anxiety attack from a lot of stress being in a new place. Tim disagrees, saying, oh, I'm not like my mom. The doctor prescribes him a muscle relaxer. So that way, anytime he feels another episode's coming on, he should take those. The doctor also says that him and his girlfriend are lucky because there was a recent couple that actually went missing in that same area where they moved into, which we come to find out that's who the police and everybody were searching for. But yeah, because of that, now Tim goes home and starts to research this couple, and he and Millie start having a conversation about when people go missing, their last Instagram post or Facebook post, and they start making jokes about like what I want my last post to be before I die type of thing. While they're joking around, we have Jamie just out of the blue shows up at their house. He's saying, oh, I just wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood again. We see immediately that there's like a little bit of a tension between the three of them because it seemed to me that he likes Millie and Millie was condoning it. She invites him in. They start having dinner, and they get to talking about the area around. We have Jamie explaining that there was a church out there, and he said like, oh, some hippie new age thing that was their church, but a storm took it down. And then he said that all the people for the church just like started disappearing. We find out that the people that were missing, that they searched for many months, but nobody could find anything. And this has Tim a lot more intrigued about what's going on with this cave. Then the couple start doing some awkward airing of laundry about Tim feeling that he's trapped, and she's saying, well, I don't want to keep you prisoner here, like you can go. And they're having this passive aggressive conversation right in front of Jamie, and Jamie just kind of says, oh, this is awkward, I'm gonna go home now. And then he leaves. Then we got Tim, who kind of, remarks about, oh, I think that guy likes you. And then, of course, she's like, oh, no, he doesn't. And then he can't control himself. He blacks out again and just starts kissing her. And because she's been craving the intimacy so much, he doesn't really question it. But then again, their lips, like their legs in the cave, get stuck together. And then when they pull away, it like hurts. They get into another argument about the whole intimacy thing. We all know something else is going on with Tim's character.
Yeah, I mean, we're at the point where from this point on, things just get stranger and stranger. Tim keeps having these weird episodes where he's physically pulled toward Millie, like his body just can't help it. And then, yeah, Jamie, this friendly neighbor, comes over for dinner and they tell him about the cave. And Jamie's like, oh, yeah, that used to be some kind of new age church before it caved in, which is, a great creepy detail. But yeah, he's just kind of like, oh, yeah, by the way, that's where this used to be. And then, yeah, the back and forth between Tim and Millie was really well done.
Yeah, I don't know if you were feeling it at this point in the movie. From from when he spoke to Millie in the teachers lounge, I already started to be like there's something off about this guy. I didn't know what was going to happen specifically in the end, but then it kind of confirmed to me that he knows a lot about this church or whatever. At this point, I was like, I think he's involved in some way. Like, I thought it was going to be revealed that he was keeping that couple prisoner for some reason. We won't jump to that yet, but I thought he knew more than what he was letting on, which we find out is to be true. Did you feel that way as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty common movie trope too. Like this being a smaller scale movie. Like so the director, from the research I did, this is his first film.
Oh,
Um, but having such a condensed cast of characters, like I knew somebody had to be the villain, and somebody was going to be poking the bear left, right, and center. And yeah, it his character did a good way of kind of shadowing that, villainy, I guess, if you want to call it that. But yeah, I knew there had to be some sort of involvement
yeah.
down the line. Yeah.
So in the next scene, they go to bed. Millie wakes up and she sees that Tim is like choking on her hair, basically. She turns on the light and then she starts dragging it away from him. He awakes from his trance and he's trying to pull it out as well.
Millie
Uh,
drops Tim off at the train station for a gig, but he has another one of those episodes and drags himself all the way to her school. Tim crashes into her in a bathroom stall, and it turns into this angry, desperate hookup. And then their bodies fuse together, stuck. They have to painfully rip apart from each other. And Jamie and this poor kid, because they go into the and this kid is just there doing his business, and then for a elementary school kid, he's just looking, and it's like, hey, there's two sets of legs there. And then so we see the kid leave, and then next thing you know, there's two sets of legs outside the stall, and it's Jamie and the kid. And then Millie exits the stall, and it's like, oh yeah, it's just me, I had an incident. And so the boy leaves, and then Jamie's on his way out. He's like, okay, don't let it happen again. Just use the female teacher's restroom. And then he's leaving, and then Tim's he hides himself in the stall, and then he climbs out. So then yeah, Jamie sees the whole thing, and he kind of knows what's going on there. And then later, after this incident, Millie goes over to Jamie's place to apologize, and he starts talking about this whole other half idea, like how you're incomplete without your soulmate. It's creepy, but it's also kind of the metaphor for the whole movie.
the only other thing I had in that scene was that they had the trope of like a little girl or like a child drawing a creepy image. And like for whatever reason in her class, Millie's student is left behind. She sees her drawing the combined dog on the piece of paper and she just runs off. And then, yeah, Millie is talking to her friend from that first scene at the party. Again, this friend is like, oh, Tim is such a waste of time, basically. We come to find out that they've been dating for 10 years because Millie brings up that their first date, he found out that she likes the Spice Girls, and then the next date brought her the vinyl of the Spice Girls record. And yeah, I was like, 10 years? Put a ring on it, Tim. Like 10 years is a long time, man, to
Hey,
be
Millie tried.
yeah, with no ring, with the empty hands, looking like Namor in Black Panther. We get to understand a bit of Millie's frustration. This happens a few times throughout the movie. She's like chilling, doing her own thing, and then the camera just pans, and Tim is just outside, like looking like a creep. Yeah, they're back at home. They have a huge fight once again, but then Tim goes onto his laptop to do more research about this couple that's been lost. He goes to this Facebook post that we see throughout the movie of this couple, like maybe the last picture they took while they were in the woods. And then he uses the coordinates of the photo, because a lot of photos just have their location where you took it. And he sees that it's literally the same hole, an area where they fell into and everything. And then I put in my notes, did no cop or detective think to do that with this photo? Like, was he the first person to think of this while they had like months long search? That was something that took me out of the movie. He was already kind of interested with this whole situation going on with them in the hole and the water that they drank, and he thinks that something's going on with them, so he thinks maybe this couple's disappearance has something to tie with it now, and there's like a whole conspiracy going on in his head. And then we get a jump scare type scene where we just hear loud thuds, and we see Millie's character just slam into the glass door, and she's floating and seizing, and he opens the door, she falls onto him, she's unconscious now, he ends up slapping her to wake her from the trance. They decide to sit down and have a conversation about what's going on. He wants to find out more about this hole and everything going on there. She tries to leave, but she stops. And as we're seeing now, it's the first time that this thing is affecting her instead of affecting just him. She's trying to be logical and say, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm going to go upstairs, go to sleep. It's best that you sleep in another room. He agrees because he thinks it's best that obviously they spend space apart from each other. And she says that my parents are coming on Sunday for dinner. It'd be best if you're not here. They go upstairs and they go to sleep. And in the middle of the night, we see him wake up and he's being dragged on the floor, heading towards her room. He can't control it. He holds onto something. So now she's getting dragged out of her bed. It opens up her door. And then like in this kind of freaky scene, she's contorting her body and everything. And she's also being dragged towards him on the floor. They eventually touch, and it starts to combine their arms in a pretty gruesome scene. And he suggests that they use the Valium that was given to him by the doctor, the muscle relaxer. So they knock over the dresser and they work with each other to open it. They start to snort it and just consume it the best way that they can. It cuts to them waking up in the morning, and we have Millie getting ready to saw them out from being attached, and they eventually say that this must be the only way. She saws them in half, and then she starts bandaging up their arms, and they're just sitting there enjoying their breakfast, and they got to figure out what the hell they're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good point to touch back because Tim, has been unraveling from the get-go. He goes to the doctor, and the doctor just tells him it's just panic attacks. Like, that's helpful. And then, yeah, as you mentioned, Tim is doing detective level research, which apparently no other cop or detective or private investigator has done. But he figures out another couple went missing after visiting that same cave. And then, yeah, that night it all goes full blown body horror. Tim and Millie literally get dragged together. Their bodies are twisting and contorting until their arms fuse, and it's gross, like sticky, squirm in your seat gross. And then they down some pills to stop it and pass out. And then, yeah, as you mentioned, when Tim wakes up, Millie's got him tied to a chair, and she literally saws through their fused arm. And then jumping ahead a little bit, Tim, after that traumatic incident, Tim goes right back to the cave and finds the missing couple, which has fused into this horrifying, like Cronenberg looking monster. Like, it's just, ugh.
There's one thing I forgot to mention in this scene. In that first scene, when they're talking after Millie's proposal, she says a line like, if you don't want to get married or whatever, if you don't want to do this, let's just separate now, because it'll only be harder if we keep waiting. And then in that scene again, when she's sawing their arm, she says the exact same line. She's like, let's separate now, or it'll be harder as we keep going, which I thought was a pretty cool callback to two very completely different scenarios. They're kind of starting to argue about what to do next. Like, we have Millie, I keep on wanting to call her Annie because of fucking Community, but we have Millie trying to be logical and say, we just sawed our arms in half. You saw what happened last night. I'm going to the hospital. He's like, no, we need to go to this cave and figure out what's going on. So she says, well, I'm going to the hospital. And then she realizes, oh, I left my keys at Jamie's. And she's like, I'm just going to go and get it. Are you coming? And he's like, no, I'm just going to stay here. Don't worry about me. And she's like, don't do anything stupid. He's like, I would never do that. As soon as she takes off down the road, he just immediately runs over to the cave, grabs some supplies, and gets a rope and goes down there. We see the same thing like when he gets down there, that the floor is really sticky. So I'm thinking that once you have this water, the cave and everything starts to also become a part of you, or you become a part of the cave, because we see when he uses the flashlight, people's faces, like it looks like they've been sucked into the walls. And then this monstrosity of two humans kind of combined, and they look like they're just having a horrible existence, come crawling over to him. He falls over and he's stuck on the ground. They have like a knife jammed in their neck, which kind of gives the inclination that they were trying to kill themselves. He ends up coming loose and grabbing the knife and immediately runs up the rope and escapes and runs back to the house. Meanwhile, Millie going over to Jamie's house, and the doors just open. We don't hear him saying anything. She's calling out to him. Then we hear a video playing, and we see down like this dark hall in this dark room. We see this video of the wedding of the same cult in that church that is now underground, and it's this wedding ceremony that has the picture of the Greek, the non-split body, like two heads and four arms, four legs, and it seems like this whole church is devoted to that whole thing where they think like you're supposed to find this other half and then combine back. Basically, we see them go into the tunnel, they drink the water, they cut their arms, and then they start holding hands. Jamie just appears behind her and is trying to explain to her this thing that's happening to her and Tim is a beautiful thing. It's so difficult, you just have to push through to this next point. And she's like, I don't want to do that. He gives her a big slash on her arm, like pretty gnarly slash, and she in reaction punches him, and then we see that the punch causes his face to like morph a little bit, and we see that he's a combined person as well. So we can assume that the person in that video, those two men that were getting married, just combined to be Jamie. She just runs off to go back to the house. Tim recreates the same thing and gets down on one knee and opens his hands with no box, and proposes. Basically, they come together and realize that they really do love each other, and they're trying to figure out what's best to do. He says that he's going to kill himself in order to be free and so she can live her life, but she doesn't want that, obviously, because she loves him too. But at that instance, she faints, and she looks like she's about to die. And the only way that he could stop the blood from coming out was for him to put his arm there and morph their arms together once again. And then he brings her back inside, and they talk a little bit more and figure out that this is just what's going to have to happen. None of them wants to live without the other anyway. So they kind of just agree to let it happen. He puts on the Spice Girls song Two Become One, which is very fitting. They slowly dance, and then we see they start to morph in all sorts of very gross ways, becoming one. We basically just jump to the point where the parents show up that Sunday for the dinner she was talking about, and they ring the doorbell, and we see that now they have a bell of like that church with the sun on it that Jamie also had. And yeah, they open the door, and it's like this androgynous person that we can now assume is the combination of Jamie and Tim. And then that's the end of the movie. It just cuts to credits.
Yeah, I mean, Millie finding this video at Jamie's house that shows exactly what's been happening all along, this ritual where two people fuse on purpose. And then, yeah, Jamie is actually the fused version of the two men. And like you said, Jamie thinks it's great. He's all over it. He's trying to convince Millie to go all in and join Tim. And then when she refuses, he slices her arm open to officially start the process. She escapes and stumbles into Tim on the street. He's basically ready to end it to save her, but then she's bleeding out, so he puts his arm on her wound, fuses himself to her to save her, and then ultimately, they just give in. And yeah, in the middle of all this, they slow dance to Two Become One by the Spice Girls. It's gross and weird and somehow romantic at the same time, and they fuse into one person. And then yeah, that last scene, Millie's parents come to visit that weekend, knock on the door, and this completely androgynous fused person answers with that creepy cave symbol on the door. And yeah, that's how it ends. And honestly, I mean, like I said before, this movie is super gnarly. It's sticky and uncomfortable. I was squirming in my seat, but that's also why I liked it so much. It uses this gross body horror as a way to show how toxic relationships can feel like you're literally stuck to someone. It's messed up, it's funny at times, it's weirdly romantic, and my crowd was eating it up.
Yeah, I thought this third act was so rushed. From when she goes to go and get her keys, I felt like that didn't have a ton of time to breathe between. It was basically like two scenes, and then the movie just cuts to credits. We don't get a ton of resolution. I kind of felt it was rushed, even the resolution between Tim and Millie. just because they've been having so many issues throughout the course of the movie. Another thing about just the whole combination of the couples, at least how I interpreted it, is that there are some couples that obviously want to be independent, but when you're independent, you have to run the risk of being like more alone, obviously. And then when you want to be with somebody and share a life with somebody, you run the risk of not always being so independent. So I thought that the whole combination thing was basically like the movie saying like you have to pick a lane. You can't be half in and half out, which is what I took from Millie and Tim combining, and then as well as Jamie's combination. Whereas that couple in the cave that were kind of like this monster that didn't fully combine, they were like the allegory of a couple that's like 1 foot in the relationship, 1 foot out of the relationship. That's at least how I took it. I'm very happy with the direction that horror movies from this company, Neon, and then obviously A24, I think that they are both, doing great this year. And I like that these new kind of a little bit more disgusting but psychological horror things that actually touch on stuff in real life. I had a very fun time with this movie, and I would recommend it if you're a horror fan for sure.
How many stars did you give it?
Well, first, let me say Rotten Tomatoes, as the time of us recording, has this as a 91 critics rating. So, just for reference, that is a higher rating for critics than Jurassic Park, Superman, and Fantastic Four and Thunderbolts, just from a few movies that we've talked about in the past few weeks. But interestingly enough, the audience score is quite low. It's a 79% audience score. So it's a little bit more divisive for viewers. And I think the critics are liking it a bit more. On Letterboxd, as of right now, it's a 3.5 out of 5. And that's exactly what I gave it. I gave it a 3.5 stars out of 5. I enjoyed it quite a lot. What about you?
So I gave it 4 stars. I think it was a better film than all of the ones you just mentioned, except for Superman. Um, However, I kind of think that I might need a rewatch because I feel like my score is, it could go up, it could go down depending on a rewatch. Because it's one of those movies that you might not catch everything on one go. There will probably be little subtleties and just like, things that you might not think about during a standard watch. So I might go see it again, and that rating could shift up or down. But yeah, at the moment, I have it at 4 stars out of 5.
I'm glad that you said that because when I was doing my ranking last night, I was like, oh, I also have it ranked higher than Fantastic Four and Thunderbolts and lower than Superman.
I think for me, it's definitely close. I think it's closer to, because I had Fantastic Four and Thunderbolts at the exact same rating.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little bit closer. It's above, but it's a little bit closer to those two than it is to Superman.
That's fair.
But like I said, that might change for me on a rewatch. Because if you look at my Letterboxd, I actually haven't ranked it yet. Because I don't know where I don't know where to put it on my list. My top 10 is very robust at the moment, and I'm not sure if it'd be in that top 10 or just outside it. So I'm probably gonna rewatch it before it leaves and just finalize.
Anything else you have before we wrap up?
No, I am all good.
I'd like to see Dave Franco and Alison Brie in more movies, more lead roles together as a couple. They could have like a thing going on here. They could make a whole franchise with just the two of them. They were that good.
Yeah, I think that they'd be very successful together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I say that we just end on that note right there. But yeah, next week we'll be reviewing Weapons.
Hopefully everybody enjoyed our thoughts on Together, and we look forward to you tuning in next week for Weapons.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for listening and take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.